Pilate did not believe Jesus deserved to die. That is not speculation. It is recorded in all four Gospels. Luke chapter 23, verse 4, states that Pilate found no basis for a charge against this man. John chapter 18, verse 38 records the same conclusion. Mark chapter 15, verse 14 shows Pilate asking the crowd what evil Jesus had actually done. And Matthew chapter 27, verse 24 describes Pilate washing his hands before the assembled crowd, declaring himself innocent of this man's blood. Four independent accounts, four writers from different communities and different decades, all recording the same uncomfortable detail. The Roman governor said he was innocent, and yet Jesus was crucified. Roman crucifixion was not a careless act. It was not handed out for minor offenses or theological disputes. It was a state punishment reserved for rebellion, sedition, and direct threats to imperial authority. Rome did not execute harmless teachers, so the question becomes unavoidable. If Pilate publicly and repeatedly declared Jesus innocent, why did Rome proceed with the execution? Was this simply political weakness? A governor too afraid of a crowd to act with integrity? Or was something else happening beneath the surface? A deliberate reframing of events, designed to satisfy Rome while silencing a movement that was becoming impossible to ignore. By the end of this investigation, we will examine the legal structure of Roman provincial trials, the explosive political atmosphere of Passover Jerusalem, the specific accusations presented to Rome, and the possibility that the charge written above the cross concealed something far more calculated than justice. To understand the trial, we first need to understand the world that produced it. Jerusalem in the first century was not a quiet provincial town. It was a volatile, densely populated religious center under military occupation. And it had been under foreign dominance for nearly a century, since 63 BCE, when the Roman general Pompey entered Jerusalem and walked uninvited into the temple. Judea had lived under Roman control. The experience had never been peaceful. Jewish identity was deeply tied to land, law, and the expectation of divine sovereignty. All of that was implicitly challenged every single day by the Roman presence. By the time of Jesus, the region was governed by a Roman prefect who answered directly to the emperor. Pontius Pilate held that office from approximately 26 to 36 CE. The most important extra-biblical source for this period is Flavius Josephus. He was a first-century Jewish historian who wrote under Roman patronage and had every reason to be careful with his words. In Antiquities of the Jews, Book 18, Josephus describes Pilate as a governor prone to provoking Jewish customs, resistant to negotiation, and capable of severe repression when challenged. Passover made an already unstable situation far more dangerous. According to Josephus, Jerusalem's population swelled dramatically during the great pilgrimage festivals. Hundreds of thousands of Jews poured into the city, bringing with them religious intensity, national memory, and the suppressed hope of liberation from foreign rule. Rome was well aware of this pattern. The Roman governor normally resided in Caesarea Maritima, on the coast, but during Passover, he relocated to Jerusalem with additional troops, not as a gesture of respect, as a show of force. Crucifixion was the most visible expression of that force. It was public, prolonged, and deliberately humiliating. Roman law reserved it primarily for slaves, foreign insurgents, and individuals convicted of crimes against the state, particularly treason. The Jewish religious leadership operated inside a carefully maintained arrangement. The temple authorities held jurisdiction over religious matters, but the power to execute, to carry out a death sentence, required Roman authorization. John, chapter 18, verse 31, records the Jewish leaders acknowledging this explicitly. It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. This created a layered judicial process. Religious accusation had to be translated into Roman legal language before an execution could happen. That translation is the center of this investigation. The Gospels describe two separate phases of the trial. Each phase reveals something critical, and the shift between them is where the story becomes most interesting. The first phase takes place before the Jewish council, the Sanhedrin. In Mark chapter 14, verses 61 through 64, the high priest asks Jesus directly whether he is the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One. Jesus affirms the claim. He speaks of the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest tears his garments. The council declares it blasphemy and moves toward a death sentence. But blasphemy was not a crime Rome executed. A man claiming to be the Jewish Messiah was a religious offense. It might provoke outrage inside the temple. But to Pilate, a Roman official responsible for civil order, not doctrinal purity, it carried no legal weight at all. So when Jesus is handed over to Rome, the charge must change. And it does. Luke chapter 23, verse 2 records the formal accusation presented to Pilate with unusual precision. We found this man misleading our nation, forbidding tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. 3 accusations, but only one of them matters to Rome: king. That single word had the power to transform a religious dispute into a capital case. Claiming kingship in a Roman province was not a theological matter. It was an act of political defiance. Under the Lex Iulia de maiestate, Rome's law against crimes that threatened the state, it could be prosecuted as treason. John, chapter 19, verse 12, records the moment when Pilate's hesitation finally collapses. The Jewish leaders issue what amounts to a direct political threat. If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar. This is not an appeal to justice or religious principle. It is leverage. They are placing Pilate's career, and potentially his life, on the scale alongside an accused man. If you are finding this investigation valuable, subscribing ensures you will not miss the next episode. The story goes further than most people expect. To understand why that leverage worked, we need to step inside Roman political thinking. The Roman Empire was pragmatic about religion. It absorbed local gods, tolerated diverse practices, and generally left religious communities alone as long as they did not challenge Roman authority. What Rome did not tolerate, under any circumstances, was a rival claim to sovereignty. The title King of the Jews was not merely offensive to Roman ears, it was structurally threatening. Josephus documents this pattern across multiple incidents. In Antiquities, Book 17, and in Jewish War, Book 2, he describes the period following the death of Herod the Great, when several figures arose claiming royal authority over the Jewish people. Rome crushed each movement with organized military force, not because these claimants had armies, because unchallenged claims had a way of becoming movements, and movements had a way of becoming revolts. Rome preferred to act before the final stage arrived. In Antiquities, Book 20, Josephus describes a man named Theudas, who led a large crowd to the Jordan River, promising a miraculous crossing. Rome sent cavalry. Theudas was beheaded, and the crowd dispersed. In Jewish War, Book 2, Josephus describes prophets who gathered followers in the desert, promising signs of liberation. Rome moved against them before anything materialized. None of these figures had launched an armed uprising. The claim itself was the justification for suppression. Now consider the inscription above the cross. John chapter 19 verse 19 records that Pilate had a notice prepared and placed above Jesus. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." The text was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek, the three main languages of first-century Jerusalem, ensuring that every person in that crowd could read it. This was not decorative. It was a formal legal statement. The titulus crucis, the placard placed above the condemned, declared the official Roman reason for the execution. Rome had made its position permanent and public. This man died as a claimant to kingship. The charge was political sedition. The historical record contains several details that complicate any straightforward reading of Roman justice being served. John chapter 18 verse 36 records Jesus telling Pilate directly that his kingdom is not of this world. He adds that if it were, his servants would have fought to prevent his arrest. From a purely Roman analytical standpoint, this response should have resolved the matter. A non-territorial, non-military kingdom with no organized fighting force posed no credible threat to imperial stability. Pilate appears to recognize this. His repeated hesitation across all four gospel accounts, unusual for a Roman governor known for decisiveness, suggests a man who did not see a genuine insurgent standing before him. Luke chapter 23, verses 6 through 12, records a step that is often overlooked entirely. When Pilate learns that Jesus is from Galilee, he sends him to Herod Antipas, the regional ruler of that territory, who happened to be in Jerusalem for Passover. Herod questions Jesus at length. He finds the encounter more curious than alarming. Luke chapter 23, verse 15, records Pilate's summary. Herod found nothing in him deserving death. Two Roman-aligned authorities, both reaching the same conclusion. So why did the execution proceed? Pilate's personal political situation may hold the answer. Philo of Alexandria was a Jewish philosopher and a contemporary of the events. In On the Embassy to Gaius, sections 299 through 305, Philo describes Pilate in unusually direct language, speaking of corruption, cruelty, and a pattern of provoking the Jewish population unnecessarily. More importantly, Philo describes a specific incident in which Pilate had installed gilded shields bearing the emperor's name inside the Herodian palace in Jerusalem. The Jewish leadership complained directly to the Emperor Tiberius. Tiberius sided with the Jewish leaders. Pilate received a formal rebuke. That rebuke was on record in Rome. Pilate had already demonstrated that he was a governor who created unnecessary conflict. A second serious complaint, particularly one involving a man publicly proclaimed as king, allowed to go free during the most politically sensitive week of the Jewish calendar, could end his career entirely. The decision before Pilate was not really about the guilt or innocence of one man. It was about the survival of his own position. This channel examines the historical and biblical record without simplifying what it finds. If that approach matters to you, leaving a comment helps others discover this content. The phrase Roman cover-up must be handled carefully. There is no ancient document that admits deliberate concealment. No surviving record from Pilate's administration acknowledges a miscarriage of justice. What we have is a pattern, and patterns in historical evidence deserve serious attention. Consider how responsibility is distributed across the record. Pilate washes his hands publicly in Matthew chapter 27, verse 24, declaring himself innocent of this man's blood. The gesture is performed before the crowd. It is both a legal disclaimer and a public performance, designed to transfer culpability away from the Roman office and onto those who demanded the execution. The inscription above the cross frames the charge in political terms: King of the Jews, not blasphemer, not false prophet, king. This means that Rome's official record of the execution describes a political criminal, not a religious one. The theological dispute that drove the proceedings is absent from the documentation. John chapter 19, verse 15, contains one of the most striking lines in the entire Passion narrative. When Pilate asks the chief priests whether he should crucify their king, they respond, "We have no king but Caesar." Consider what that statement requires of the men saying it. These are temple authorities, men whose entire identity was organized around the sovereignty of God over Israel, the coming of a king from the line of David, and the theological conviction that no earthly ruler held ultimate authority. For them to declare loyalty to Caesar, publicly, on record, in front of a crowd, represents an extraordinary and desperate act. They are not expressing genuine conviction. They are deploying a political formula to close the trap around Pilate. The result is a distribution of accountability so carefully arranged that no single party bears it entirely alone. The Jewish leadership initiates the charge and applies the pressure. Rome processes the execution through its legal machinery. Pilate performs his public disclaimer. Each actor retains a degree of insulation from the outcome. Whether we call this a cover-up, a political arrangement, or simply the ordinary mechanics of imperial justice, what the record shows is a trial in which the stated charge did not match the original accusation, in which the presiding judge twice declared the defendant not guilty before ordering his execution, and in which the formal documentation of the death was written to serve Roman interests rather than reflect what had actually occurred. Jesus was executed under a Roman charge. That charge was political, and the Gospels, 4 independent accounts, insist that the man who ordered the execution did not believe the charge was deserved. The historical record confirms the pressure Pilate was under. Josephus documents a province permanently on the edge of unrest. Philo documents a governor with a compromised record and a specific vulnerability to political threats from the Jewish leadership. The Gospels document a judicial process in which a theological accusation was transformed into a capital charge over the course of a single night. Rome may not have genuinely believed Jesus was preparing an armed revolt, but Rome could not afford to be seen ignoring a man publicly proclaimed as king during Passover week in an occupied city. Whether we describe what happened as political cowardice, strategic calculation, or deliberate reframing, the result was the same. A man declared innocent was executed under a charge of kingship, and the inscription above the cross, written in 3 languages so that no one present could claim they did not understand it, ensured that history would remember Rome's official version of events. King of the Jews. Was it the truth? Was it irony? Was it a warning to anyone else who might consider a similar claim? Or was it Rome's final attempt to control the narrative of what had just happened? The documents leave us with tension rather than resolution, and that tension is precisely where history becomes most worth examining. If this investigation raised questions you want to explore further, the next video goes deeper into the political world that surrounded the crucifixion. It is already on the channel.